Ava Carter was 42. She carried warm brown eyes that had learned to hide a deep hurt, and a body that refused the cruel, narrow standards of the East Coast elite her last name had pushed her into. As a black woman from old money roots, she stood out not for fortune, but for quiet grace, for the way she regarded people as if every person held a story worth hearing. Yet behind her back, the same crowd that applauded her charity called her the fat heiress. Her husband, Derek Langford, was one of them. That morning, the Greenwich, Connecticut mansion smelled of fresh jasmine and gourmet coffee. It was Derek's birthday. The private chef had staged a special brunch, and Ava had personally arranged fresh flowers through the living room. She had chosen a high-end Rolex he craved, not for its timekeeping, but for the designer name that would flash on his wrist in campaign photos. Derek, 7 years younger, was an up-and-coming politician, charming on stage and cold in private. His gaze was predatory, always gaming out the next move. They had been married a decade. No children. No scandals. No love. Sometimes Ava wondered if the love had ever been real, or if she had simply dreamed it up, like a beachfront house that never gets built. At 10:16 a.m., she descended the grand staircase with an envelope in hand. Inside was a certificate for a $100,000 gift in Derek's name to a National Children's Foundation. She figured it would make him smile. He loved looking generous, and loved even more to see his image polished on social media. The dining room sat empty, but voices drifted from the parlor. She paused from habit and stood still behind the slightly open door. Then she heard it. "That fat cow disgusts me, Mom," Derek said, laughing under his breath. "I only care about her money. You think I actually enjoy sleeping with her?" Ava stopped breathing. Linda Langford, her mother-in-law, sounded unsurprised, as if confirming the obvious. "At least pretend, Derek. Keep it up until you inherit every last thing. After that, you know what to do. That woman's days in your life are numbered. Do you want to be tied to a body like an inflated bag, a piñata stuffed with regrets?" They laughed with the careless lightness of people unburdened by shame. Ava swallowed. The envelope slipped from her hand without a sound. Her face stayed calm, but her legs quivered as if the world had suddenly lurched forward. She held steady, backed away, climbed the stairs on silent heels, and closed her bedroom door as if nothing had happened. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't confront them. That night they ate together. Ava offered a careful smile and handed over his gift. Derek thanked her with a dry peck on the cheek and performed enthusiasm. Linda praised the wine and suggested Ava try a friend's new diet. Everyone laughed except Ava. She watched them both with a serenity that felt less like calm and more like strategy. After midnight, Derek snored in the main suite while Ava walked barefoot through the house. She studied every corner, the artwork she'd chosen, the furniture she had imported from Italy, the grand piano she never learned to play. Every object stood as a silent witness to a life that had never really been hers, a museum built to fit a mold that had choked her for years. In the study, she wrote in a steady hand, "Thanks for showing your true colors." She didn't sign. She folded the note, opened her laptop, and in under an hour reached a discreet real estate broker and a foreign buyer, then moved the bulk of her fortune to a Swiss account under a different identity. Years managing her family's wealth had taught her how to shift money without leaving tracks. By 5 in the morning, the mansion was behind her. No servant saw her leave. She carried only a backpack, a long coat, her passport, and a photo of herself at 18, when she dreamed of traveling the world before the Langford name turned her into a trophy wife. 2 hours later, Derek woke and called for his wife, confused by the silence. He checked the kitchen, the garden, the baths. He found her only as a note on the pillow. "Thanks for showing your true colors." He crumpled it, not understanding, never imagining she'd heard him. He chalked it up to a tantrum, a stupid impulse, emotional nonsense. He called her phone, off. He texted, nothing. He called his mother. "Where is Ava? Why are you asking me?" She left. She left a note. "Thanks for showing your true colors." What does that even mean? For the first time, Linda felt a chill. That same day, Derek learned the house had been sold. The buyer wired funds straight to a Swiss account. He had no access. Legally, everything belonged to Ava, even his suits. What he didn't know, the media was about to explode. A bank tied to the transfer had inadvertently leaked a statement to a finance reporter investigating Derek for corruption. In a few days, the scandal would hit national TV. Meanwhile, Ava sat on a city bus heading toward Chicago's South Shore, where nobody would recognize her. She looked out the window, eyes calm, mouth align. She kept her old photo in her coat's inner pocket like an amulet, and, for the first time in years, breathed easily. No fixed plan, no destination, only a single aim: start from a place where she was worth nothing, and discover how much she was worth. That evening's news announced, the wife of rising political figure Derek Langford has disappeared. Rumors say she sold their mansion and emptied her accounts. Some say kidnapping. Others call it a marital scandal. No one knew, but she did. She knew the real kidnapping was her entire life. Contempt dressed as marriage would no longer live in her world. She also knew the world would soon meet a woman once, labeled a lucky fat girl who was now determined to prove there is nothing more powerful than a woman who doesn't need anyone else to lift her up. No one imagined that behind that quiet smile was a truth larger than any betrayal. Ava Carter hadn't run. She had awakened. The bus rolled along dusty streets, the windows fogged with damp morning air. Her backpack rested on her lap. Inside, no jewels, no designer clothes, no expensive perfume, only documents, some cash, a notebook filled with lines she wrote when her chest couldn't hold the tears, and that faded photograph of her youth, arms open to the ocean as if the world belonged to her. Back then, she hadn't met Derek. Back then, she hadn't become the elegant shadow of a fraudulent life. The brakes screeched. The driver turned his head without interest and said, "South Shore, last stop." Ava stood. No one looked at her. No one recognized the woman who 2 days ago smiled from magazine spreads and charity pages. Here she was invisible, and for the first time that felt like relief. South Shore wasn't poor. It was wounded. Cracked facades told stories of savage winters, broken promises, and hopes growing like weeds between stones. Children ran barefoot through dirty puddles. Women swept sidewalks with babies on their hips. A man sold BBQ ribs from a truck on the corner. An old radio spitting timeless, soulful R&B. Ava walked the blocks, taking in everything with a mix of fear and fascination. A taped-up notice on a gate caught her eye. Room for rent, shared bath, no questions asked. She knocked. A woman in her 60s, face weathered and eyes wary, opened. "Looking for something?" "I saw the sign," Ava said. "I'm looking for a place to stay for a while. I can pay up front." The woman scanned her top to toe. Something didn't fit. Too much poise, skin too well cared for here. "Name?" Ava hesitated a fraction. "Maya Solis." "That's an odd name. Come in." "The room's free, but I don't do refunds and I don't like trouble." "You won't have any." The room was small. A twin bed, a fan that sounded ready to fall from the ceiling, and a window missing a proper pane. Damp stains mottled the walls. It smelled of confinement, but to her it felt like sanctuary. She paid for a month and settled in. That night she didn't cry. She lay on the hard mattress, closed her eyes, and let the silence do its work. Next day, she wandered the neighborhood. She introduced herself as someone ruined by financial fraud, a woman who had lost everything. It wasn't a lie, though not for the reasons people assumed. They looked with pity and a little morbid curiosity. She was new, strange, another sad story among many. She reached a small community health center. The facade was peeling. Inside were 2 rusty exam tables, broken plastic chairs, and a makeshift reception desk cobbled from cardboard boxes. A woman argued with a young man about medicine she couldn't afford. "Ma'am, I already told you we don't have that antibiotic. And if you buy it outside, I can't guarantee it's authentic." The voice belonged to a tall man with messy brown hair, sleeves rolled up, and the dark circles of sleepless nights. His eyes carried sorrow, but his tone stayed firm and warm. Ava watched him for a few seconds. He glanced at her briefly, then refocused on the patient. Tell your son to keep coming. Even if you don't have the money, we don't deny care here. We'll find the medicine somehow. When they finished, Ava stepped forward. Are you the doctor? I'm Elijah Vance. Do you need medical attention? No, I came to volunteer. I have experience in organizational management, inventory, coordinating donations, things like that. Elijah studied her in silence. Something in her voice held a certainty that didn't match her story of having lost everything. He didn't challenge her. He offered his hand. Welcome, Maya. This place needs more hands than questions. And so it began. In the days that followed, Ava learned to fold stained sheets, sort boxes of expired supplies, and receive tiny donations that arrived like miracles. No one asked about her past. Only what she did now mattered. In that same clinic, she met Lena, 8 years old, dull hair, wide dark eyes that seemed to know too much. She perched on the exam table, head resting on the shoulder of a sweet-faced elder. Miss Della, she hasn't eaten for 3 days. The woman said Lena had fevers at night and her skin was getting paler. Elijah examined her, ordered tests, then stepped into the hall and leaned on the wall, his face tense. What is it? Ava asked. I suspect leukemia, but we need the labs, and that costs money. Ava looked through the window. Lena played with a doll missing an arm, whispering as if it could keep her secrets. Miss Della approached Ava once Elijah left. You're not from around here. Forgive me, but your hands are clean, nails neat, back straight. Life here tends to hunch us. Ava said nothing. Don't worry. I had my secrets when I was young, too. I'm not judging. I'm saying when a woman hides something, she has to be careful whose eyes she lets on her. Some are only looking for flesh, and others are looking for a soul. Elijah's the second? Ava nodded, a lump in her throat. 2 weeks passed. Ava became part of the place, not for what she knew, but for what she gave. Time, listening, commitment. She cleaned, assisted, and carried boxes. At night, she wrote the same line again and again. I never made time for the poor until I became one of them. One morning, while filing in the cramped office, the phone rang. Elijah answered in a routine tone, but his face shifted when he heard the name. Langford? Are you sure? And the file still exists? Ava dropped a box. He looked up, said nothing, but noticed her trembling. You okay? Yeah, just a little dizzy. He ended the call in silence and stepped out to the back patio for a cigarette. Langford. The name fired like a gunshot in Ava's memory, the echo of everything she wanted buried. Later, she found him sitting alone. Can I ask what that call was about? Elijah hesitated. A patient from the past. A case I thought was closed. They mentioned a name I haven't heard in years. Langford. A chill slid over Ava. Do you know him? She lied as she had many times to survive. Elijah didn't press, but his eyes began laying out puzzle pieces. Ava didn't sleep that night. On her mattress, backpack open, photo in hand, the notebook's phrases growing heavier, she felt Maya's solace beginning to crack. In this game of names, lies, and hidden truths, she didn't know how long she could keep the new life she'd just started to build. Some wounds scar. Others won't let you breathe. The Langford name was the latter. The question wasn't if Derek would find her. It was whether, when he did, she'd be strong enough to face him, or fall back into the invisible prison she'd fought to escape. Ava stared at herself in the cracked mirror of the shared bathroom as she washed her face. The water ran murky and cold, the grimy tiles reflecting a version of her she didn't fully recognize. Maya Solis. The name had become a kind of armor. She wore it with growing ease, though a part of her still shook inside. Weeks moved slowly, but something in her reforged. The humble routine, the real human connection, the lack of appearances, it all began to shape her the way fire tempers metal. She no longer thought of Derek every hour. She no longer replayed that hateful phrase like a dagger wedged in memory. She thought of other things. Lena's laughter, the fatigue in Elijah's eyes, Miss Della's keen gaze, and an idea taking root, to build something new from the ruins, not for herself, but for women who had been used, manipulated, and silenced. Lena became her center of gravity, The girl clung to her with unshakable trust, as if she'd been waiting for her all along. They played with rag dolls, invented absurd stories, and shared silences that said more than 1,000 words. Ava didn't need biology to feel the bond. Deep down, she knew this was the love life had denied her more than once. "Have you felt invisible too?" Lena asked one morning, both of them drawing on the floor with colored chalk. "Yes, many times," Ava answered without thinking. "Then we're the same," the girl said. "When people are scared, they look away, and then you don't exist." Ava felt a knot rise in her throat. She wondered how often she herself had looked away from the safety of luxury and appearances, pretending not to see misery from behind tinted glass. The guilt followed like a shadow. One hot afternoon, music filled the neighborhood. A community fair was organized to raise funds. Elijah suggested it so everyone could breathe, but Ava took charge, convincing women to make sweets, crafts, and knitted clothes. Coordinating spaces, times, permits. Within days, she was central. "I don't know who you were before, Maya," Miss Della told her as they kneaded bread. "But who you are now is good for this place." Ava smiled. She no longer corrected people when they used her new name. It was more than a disguise. It was a self she wanted to make real. In the middle of this small rebirth, an old thread tugged loose. Elijah spoke with a nurse about an old file. A name soured Ava's stomach. Linda Langford. "She was my private patient," Elijah said. Unaware, Ava listened behind a curtain. "I was fired years ago when I refused to cover illegal prescriptions for addicted patients. Her son, the politician Derek, threatened to destroy my career." Ava felt a sharp pang. Her story and Elijah's had been linked long before they met. The same name, the same rot. The circle was closing, or maybe fate was crueler than she'd imagined. That night, when the fair ended, Ava climbed to the roof of her building. She looked up at the star-streaked sky and, for the first time since she fled, let the tears fall. Not sadness exactly, a bitter braid of gratitude and pain. She was alive. She was free. And yet shadows still clung. Miles away, Derek Langford hurled his scotch glass against his office wall. Crystals shattered. No one dared look up. His campaign was collapsing. Donors were leaving. Reporters were sniffing around the suspicious mansion sale. Ava's disappearance had become a full-blown scandal. "Find her," he told the private investigator he'd hired. "I don't care how. I need her back before this sinks me." The man, an ex-military type with a tired hound dog face, nodded without expression. He already had some leads, bank trails, phone pings, blurry security camera stills. It was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, Ava visited an old abandoned warehouse on the edge of the neighborhood. No one watched her. No one suspected she had quietly bought the place under a new identity. Her plan was clear: transform it into a foundation for women who were victims of abuse, a real shelter with counselors, meals, housing, and legal aid. A place where others like her could start over without lying about their names. She wrote everything in a thick-leafed notebook: needs, suppliers, funding ideas. Elijah helped without too many questions. He no longer looked at her with suspicion, but with something closer to admiration, though a steady melancholy still lived in his eyes. "I lost my wife to misdiagnosed pneumonia," he confessed one night. "Private care killed her. Expensive hospitals make mistakes, too. They just cover them up better." Ava listened without speaking. She knew that, in a way, he too had been broken by a rotten system. At the fair, Lena was selling handmade string bracelets. Her smile was brighter than any street lamp. She ran between the stalls with limitless energy. Miss Della watched her with tired but happy eyes. Everything flowed, until it didn't. Lena suddenly collapsed. Her body trembled once and went still. Blood beaded from her nose. The silence was immediate. Elijah sprinted to her, lifted her in his arms, and shouted, "Orders!" Ava followed, barely feeling her legs. At the clinic, they placed an IV, drew labs, and started oxygen. The verdict hit like ice water. "The leukemia has progressed," Elijah said, voice breaking. "And we don't have what we need to treat her here." Ava clenched her fists. She would not stand by, not now. Not with this girl who had given her back her soul. That night, while Lena slept with a fever, Ava opened her backpack and checked her last reserve, a single piece of jewelry she had hidden with extreme care, the only one she hadn't sold or left behind. Her grandmother's sapphire ring, worth more than the entire neighborhood. She closed her fist around it and headed into the city. The next morning, she returned with a sealed envelope and a check sufficient to begin treatment. No one asked how she got it. No one had the right. But Elijah looked at her with new eyes, not suspicion, but certainty. "You didn't come here to hide," he told her. "You came to rebuild yourself. And you know what? You're doing it even if you're still breathing through lies." Ava looked down for the first time. She wanted to tell him the truth, her real name, her story, everything. But she didn't, not yet. Lena smiled at her from the bed, lips dry. "Don't leave me." "Never," Ava replied, taking her hand. The clock kept ticking. Derek kept searching, but Ava was no longer the woman who stayed quiet after hearing she disgusted him. Now she fought, even if fear still breathed behind every smile, because lies, when sustained too long, begin to take on a life of their own, and hers were alive. The question was how much longer she could keep them under control. When a lie learns to breathe, it can learn to kill. Ava woke before sunrise, as she had almost every day since adopting the name Maya Solis. The fan whirred steadily, and the damp walls of the room looked grayer than ever. She squeezed her eyelids shut before opening them fully, trying to delay the weight that sat on her chest like a tombstone. Lena was still hospitalized, tethered to medications that barely slowed the leukemia. Every minute was a struggle. Every smile from the girl was a shield against despair. And even with the first funds from the ring, Ava knew it wouldn't be enough. The treatment would be long, brutal, costly, not just in money, but in spirit. At the clinic, Elijah watched her more closely. Her movements, her silences, the meticulous way she avoided speaking about herself. It wasn't just admiration anymore. There was something uneasy, an intuition, like walking a map he already knew but with the names erased. He was starting to suspect the story she told was trimmed, managed, glossed over. Something in him said there was more, much more, beneath that sad calm. That morning, while reviewing the medicine inventory in the tiny makeshift pharmacy, Elijah dropped a comment that wasn't accidental. "Maya, did you ever live abroad? You've got an accent, neutral, educated, not common here." She stopped, swallowed, thought fast. "I studied in Europe a few years, then worked in D.C. for a while. That's why I sometimes have that odd tone." Elijah nodded without a word, but the doubt in his eyes deepened. Hours later, Ava returned to the abandoned warehouse where she'd begun planning the foundation. She sat in the dust on a broken box and pulled out her notebook. She wrote a single line. "Fear is a cage with open doors." She closed the book and took a deep breath. Footsteps. She turned. Miss Della stood there with a bag of bread and a sharp, knowing look. "I looked for you at the clinic." "Lena asked about you," she said flatly. Ava rose, dusting her hands. "Just jotting a few things down. I need to get this place running before everything collapses." The elder set the bread on a box. "You're not running from fraud or financial ruin. I knew that the first day. Not by what you say, but by what you keep quiet. You don't run from love, dear. You run from fear. And who do you fear?" The question hung like smoke. Ava tried to answer, but didn't have words for all she carried. She managed only one, choked. "Myself." The elder nodded, needed nothing more, brushed Ava's shoulder, and left without goodbye. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Derek Langford stared at his computer with contained fury. On the screen, a photo snapped by a volunteer at a South Shore charity fair. In the frame, women gathered around a food stall. In the corner, blurred but unmistakable, Ava. Derek's heart pounded. He stood, knocked his chair back, and barked, "Get the car ready. We're going to South Shore." 3 hours later, his black SUV with tinted windows slid through dusty streets, clashing with everything around it. People watched with suspicion. Some stepped aside, others pretended not to see. Ava was hurrying back with gauze for the clinic when she spotted the car idling at the entrance. She stopped cold. Her stomach dropped. Her chest hardened. She'd recognize that vehicle by silhouette alone. She didn't think. She didn't analyze. She simply spun on her heel and walked the other way. Not running, but with the exact rhythm of someone fleeing without wanting to look like it. She slipped into an alley, then another, climbed a small rise and hid behind a broken wall until the car pulled off and vanished from sight. He hadn't seen her. Derek hadn't found her, but he was close. Too close. She couldn't sleep that night. Fear returned like an old illness. She wondered how long she could sustain this fragile peace before everything crumbled. At the clinic, Lena waited with bright eyes and held out a bracelet made of red threads. "It's so you won't leave," the girl said. "Now you're tied to me." Ava knelt by the bed, stroked her forehead. "I'm tied to you, even without the bracelet. Are you sad?" "A little. Why?" "You saved my life." Ava held back tears. "Because I don't know how to save my own." Elijah, listening from the doorway, felt something inside him break. He couldn't carry the uncertainty anymore. This woman wasn't just any woman. She had scars that didn't match her invented story. That morning, while everyone slept, Elijah slipped into the clinic's small office and powered up his laptop. He didn't know exactly what he was seeking, until his fingers typed it. He entered the name that had haunted him since he met Maya Solis, Ava Carter. The browser spilled out hundreds of results: society photos, magazine covers, headlines about her disappearance, stories on a mysterious mansion sale, political scandals, and one image that froze him. The same smile, the same eyes, the same face he'd learned to read these last months. Maya Solis didn't exist. She was a mask, a lie. But what she had done was real. The help, the tenderness, the devotion. This woman with a past like broken glass had saved lives. She had resurrected her own, and now he knew who she truly was. Ava Carter, vanished wife of the man who had fired, humiliated, and destroyed him. The circle was closing. He leaned back, shut his eyes. He couldn't pretend not to know. Now he had to decide what to do with the truth. Because the price of knowing is having the power to look away, and he wouldn't. Not again. Elijah rose without having slept. The image of Ava Carter on his screen was seared into him like a burn. Maya Solis wasn't real. He had watched her heal others while carrying her own wounds in unbearable silence. He understood that if he confronted her, nothing would stay the same. But silence would also betray what he valued most, the truth. He found her on the clinic threshold, notebook in her hands. She wasn't writing, just holding it as if it steadied her. "We need to talk," he said, plain and direct. She looked up. Her eyes showed no surprise. She'd always known he knew. "Yes," she answered, closing the notebook slowly. "It's time." They walked to the warehouse, an empty space slowly gathering meaning. Elijah watched her like a man about to toss a stone into still water, knowing he couldn't stop the ripples. "Why did you lie?" Ava leaned against the wall. Her voice was low, firm. "Because if I told the truth, they'd hunt me. He would find me. They'd use me again. And I didn't have the strength to be a pretty object in a glass case anymore." "Ava Carter," Elijah murmured, as if the name hurt his mouth. "Wife of Derek Langford, heir to one of the country's great fortunes, disappeared, turned into a national mystery, and a broken woman. They don't print that part." Elijah lowered his head. She stepped closer, met his eyes. "I didn't lie to play games. I didn't lie to manipulate anyone. I just wanted a life that didn't hurt." "And did you find it?" Ava smiled sadly. "Sometimes, when Lena laughs, when you speak to me without expecting anything, when I clean wounds with no cameras around." He listened, and what moved inside him was more than words, more than judgment. "You're not a coward," he said at last. "You were brave to leave. Now be brave enough to come back." "Come back to what?" "To say your name out loud. To face them. To take back what's yours. Because if you don't, they will. And they'll take it all again like they always do." She held his gaze a long time, and something in her chest gave way. Meanwhile, in D.C., the media erupted. An anonymous leak from the prosecutor's office revealed documents, audio, and financial movements tying Derek Langford and his mother, Linda, to money laundering, misuse of public funds, and bribery of judges. Derek yelled at his lawyers over the phone. Linda didn't leave her room, not from shame, but fear. That morning, an envelope without a return address arrived at her door. Inside, a copy of an altered birth certificate and a letter that read, "Truth can't be erased." Linda needed nothing more. The past she buried in silence had come to demand justice. In desperation, she did something she hadn't done in years. She called Elijah. He answered at the clinic. Her voice was almost unrecognizable. "Elijah, I need to talk to you. Only you." He hesitated, then agreed. They met at a discreet hotel far from cameras. Linda had aged visibly in weeks. No jewelry, no makeup, just dark circles, tremors, and the frightened flutter of her hands. "I'm not here to justify myself," she said, eyes down. "I know what I did. But you need to know something. Derek is not my son." Elijah blinked. "What are you saying?" "My husband and I couldn't have children. I was assaulted at 18. I hid it. I pretended to be the mother. I raised that child as if I didn't remember how he came into the world." The air grew heavy. "And you never told him?" "Never until now. He's becoming that man, and I can't allow it." A long silence. Then Linda set a small box on the table. Photos, documents, a sealed envelope. "Lena, the girl. What is her mother's name?" "She died in childbirth. She isn't in official records." "Look closely. That child could be his granddaughter. I don't have certainty, but there are dates, details. The son of the man who assaulted her might now have a daughter, and that daughter was with them." Elijah left as if carrying a body. He couldn't connect all the pieces, but the truth felt closer than ever. That night, Ava waited for him at the warehouse. She had been cleaning, organizing, trying not to think. One look at his face told her he brought more than bad news. "What happened?" He told her everything. About Linda, about Derek, about the possibility with Lena. Ava stood by the window and spoke without turning. "I have something to tell you, too." Elijah swallowed. "I'm sick. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. I was diagnosed a year ago. That's another reason I left. I didn't want to die surrounded by people who would only cry over my inheritance." Elijah's words failed him. "I might have a few years, maybe months if I'm lucky," she said. "But I want that time to mean something." "It will," he said, eyes wet. "We're going to build that foundation. We'll leave something that lasts even if you aren't here." She hugged him for the first time without fear, as if touching him could anchor her to this earth that would soon begin to fail her. Back in her room, Ava found an envelope with her name written in cursive. She opened it. A letter, her mother's hand. "Ava, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I don't know how much damage I did to you. I only know there were years when I hated you because you were everything I could never be. Because your father loved you more than me. Because you shone effortlessly. And I was just a gray woman trapped in a marble house. Forgive me for being harsh, for not protecting you, for not telling you that you deserved better than a husband who wanted you only for your name. I knew it from the first day, but I stayed silent as always. This letter isn't an excuse. It's a confession and a plea. Don't let my bitterness live in you. Be free. Be strong. And when you can't go on anymore, don't hide it. Let yourself be cared for, loved, supported. Because even if you never say it out loud, you also deserve to be saved." Ava broke into the kind of sobs that shake the soul, the kind that snap years of invisible chains. The foundation wasn't finished yet. Derek was still hunting for her. The diagnosis still lived in her body. But that night, for the first time, she slept without fear. Because truth hurts, yes, but it also frees. And she no longer had room to carry lies. Now she wanted only to build something before her body gave out. And she would do it with Elijah, with Lena, with her truth as the only inheritance. Work on the old warehouse finished 2 weeks early. The neighborhood's hands joined as if the project had always been theirs. Men who could barely read mixed cement with a surgeon's precision. Women who carried years of pain painted walls as if they were washing wounds. Every brick, every tile held a story. Stories no one had wanted to hear until now. The Maya Solis Foundation opened its doors in a ceremony without press, without cameras, without empty speeches. Only those who mattered came. Lena, hair already thin from chemotherapy, carried the scissors to cut the ribbon. Elijah, eyes misted, held Ava's hand as she drew a deep breath, as if each inhale were an act of resistance against death. Ava had completed the legal paperwork weeks earlier. All remaining assets, accounts, investments, and shares transferred to the foundation's name. Not a single jewel, not one property, remained in her own. Everything that once symbolized oppression would now be a tool of salvation. Ava moved slowly through the new corridors, the white walls, the murals painted by neighborhood children, the empty exam rooms waiting for patients. It moved her deeply. This place wasn't just a building. It was her legacy, her redemption. Days later, in the shadow of a hallway corner, Linda appeared. No one had seen her arrive. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, no rings. Her eyes were swollen, her body stooped as if years of guilt had finally grown too heavy. Lena slept when Linda entered her room. She sat, clumsily stroked the girl's hand, and murmured words aimed more at herself than at the child. Then she left silently, but Ava was waiting outside. "I knew you'd come," she said. Linda looked down. "I'm not here to justify myself. I came to ask your forgiveness, not for Derek. He chose his path. I'm asking for myself, for being an accomplice, for staying silent." Ava didn't speak for several seconds. "And you expect me to forgive you?" "No, just to listen." "Then speak." "I watched you fade for years. You became so perfect it was impossible to see you. You were invisible, Ava. Invisible like I was all my life. I was used, managed, forced to be quiet. You were my mirror. That's why I hated you, because you reminded me of everything I didn't dare do." Ava stepped closer, not to hug her, but to look her straight in the eye. "I hear you. I don't forgive you for what you did to me. I forgive you for what you did to yourself." Linda released tears she'd held for decades. On television, Derek was news, no longer as a politician, but as a suspect. His image flashed beneath headlines about corruption, money laundering, and ties to influence peddling networks. He'd been expelled from his party. His face no longer sold smiles, it sold scandal. And then, as a last resort, he appeared in front of the foundation. Ava watched from the second floor. She felt neither fear nor rage, only something colder, a sad compassion, like watching someone already lost. He waited in the courtyard, briefcase in hand, looking older than his years. "I didn't come to fight," he said when he saw her. "I came to make a deal." "There are no deals with you," she replied calmly. "I have proof, documents. I could sink you with a public lie. I could say you stole, that you faked your disappearance to take everything. I already did. I took everything, but not the material things. I took back the dignity you lost years ago." She stepped closer, held his eyes. "Do you really think this place is worth less than everything you had?" "No. I think this place is the only thing that's worth anything. Keep the stuff. What you'll never have is peace." Derek stepped back. The truth hit harder than any threat. "Tell your mother I hear her. And the girl doesn't need to know who her grandfather was. She already has enough love. She doesn't need yours." Before he could answer, Ava reached into her purse and handed him an envelope. "If this is the last thing you ever have from me." Derek walked away without opening it. Later, in his empty apartment, he read, "Power without love is hollow. Money without soul is death. You killed me many times while I lived, but I rose again. And you're still buried in your own ego. We're not enemies. We are nothing. Learn to be alone. Maybe then you'll start to find yourself." Elijah and Ava shared a night together. Not a night of passion, a night of truth. They slept in the same bed, listening to each other breathe, like two castaways clinging to the same plank in the ocean. "Are you scared?" he asked. "I have peace," she said, "which isn't the absence of fear, but it's enough. I love you. She didn't answer with words. She took his hand and set it on her chest. The next morning, Elijah went for coffee. When he returned, she was sleeping, smiling, but not breathing. He walked over, touched her, and knew she was gone. He didn't scream or cry at once. He simply sat beside her and held her hand until the sun fully rose. On the table were envelopes with handwritten names, one for Elijah, one for Lena, one for Miss Della, one for Linda. Elijah's note read, "Don't cry for what wasn't. Be thankful for what was. I leave the life I wanted for myself in your hands. Never let anyone doubt your light because you made me shine even in the dark." Lena's said, "You taught me a smile can heal more than medicine. Promise me you'll write your story. The world needs to know the little girl who beat fear." The Maya Solis Foundation stood. It grew, it healed. It embraced. And on one main wall, a mural with Ava's smiling face reminded everyone that some women, though they may die, never truly leave. Because what changes the world isn't money, it's the truth and the love built from it. Elijah didn't know how long he stayed by her side, maybe an hour, maybe two. The world felt paused in that small room where she, with her quiet body and lingering smile, had decided to go without dramatic goodbyes, without noise, without fear. She left as she had lived her last months, in silence, leaving indelible footprints. There was no marble cemetery funeral, no chandeliered mass, no counterfeit speeches from politicians. Her body was cremated as requested, and her ashes were scattered in the garden of the Maya Solis Foundation, right where they planted a young almond tree Lena promised to water every morning. News of her death spread quickly through the neighborhood. Women wept at the gate. Children fell silent. Lena went days without speaking. Elijah moved on autopilot, but he didn't stop. Things had to continue. He promised he wouldn't let her story be buried in that white room. It was Lena who found something more. Weeks later, in one of Ava's desk drawers, she discovered a carefully bound manuscript in the same clear, firm hand Ava used for clinic notes. The handwritten title read, "My husband said I disgusted him." The prologue began, "This isn't the story of a woman abandoned, but of a woman who learned to abandon herself to please the world and one day woke up." Elijah read it in a single night. When he finished, he knew what to do. Months later, a small independent publisher released the book. No one expected what it would become. It went viral, first online, then in traditional media. Women bought it in silence, shared it through tears, whispered about it at neighborhood meetings, studied it in universities. Ava's story wasn't just about a betrayed wife. It was about every woman who had ever felt less than enough. In interviews, Elijah spoke about the Foundation's mission. He never took a single cent for the book. All proceeds went to opening new Maya Solis Foundation locations in other regions. The idea was clear. No woman should have to disappear to live again. Lena named the second location the House of the Reborn. It was small, modest, but full of life. She herself painted a wall with the line Ava left in her letter, "Promise me you will write your story." And she did. Lena wrote. She published a children's book from her experience, where a little girl defeats the monster of gray days with a smile and a red bracelet. She was invited to book fairs, gave interviews, and always spoke of Ava as if she were still alive, because for her, she was. Elijah continued as the Foundation's medical director. Some days, the weight of her absence fell on him like stone. But he only had to step into the garden and see women laughing, children running, volunteers arriving with energy to know Ava had won, that her love had not died, that her legacy was not ash, but root. He wore a locket around his neck. Inside was a lock of hair she'd given him before she died, with a note. "When you doubt yourself, touch this. Here is the part of me that will never leave." He never opened it in public, only on solitary nights when the silence hurt. Linda changed too. No one believed it at first, not even her. But she did. She began visiting homes for vulnerable women. She volunteered anonymously at a center for abuse victims. Most unexpectedly, she donated all her properties, shares, and accounts to the Maya Solis Foundation. Then she disappeared from public view. No one heard from her again. Some said a convent, others another country. The truth was that her name stopped meaning power and became a quiet shadow that no longer sought to control anything. Derek, for his part, sank. He lost everything: fortune, reputation, allies. He tried to publish a memoir to clear his name, but no one bought it. He faded into oblivion, as men do who built empires only on lies. Elijah once saw him at a city cafe, alone, unshaven, lost. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He simply remembered what Ava had written in that last letter. "We are no longer enemies. We are nothing." A year after her death, the foundation organized a special ceremony in Ava's name. People came from many places: women who had read her book, escaped violent homes, been rescued from trafficking, or healed in silence because of her story. They spoke aloud, without shame, without fear. At the end, a woman took the microphone and said, "I was invisible until I read her story. Ava didn't die. She woke up in me and in many others." Elijah closed his eyes and smiled. As he left, Lena took his hand. "Do you think she sees us from up there?" "I have no doubt. She's in you, in me, in all of us. I dream about her sometimes." "What does she say?" "To keep writing. That words heal too." And Lena wrote,